Welcome to the UC Berkeley Data Science Education Podcast. We're happy you're listening in today. In this space, you'll hear from a variety of distinguished data science educators and professionals. The individuals we'll speak with are diverse in experience and perspective, but share the common goal of shaping the future of data science education. Our idea is to have some informal conversations with the goal of creating community and let people hear from practitioners in this growing new field. My name is Eric Van Duzen from Data Science Undergraduate Studies in the Division of Computing, Data Science, and Society at UC Berkeley, and I'll be leading our conversation today.
And my name is Harry Lee, also from Data Science Undergraduate Studies. I'm working as an intern with the division's external pedagogy team, and I'll be helping out today too.
Hi everyone, today we're excited to be talking with Byron Chu. It's great to have you with us. Can you introduce yourself and let us know where you're working?
Sure. My name is Byron Chu. I'm a project manager and data scientist at Callysto, which is a project which is run by Cybera and the Pacific Institute for the Mathematical Sciences. I live in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and the company I work for kind of serves the province of Alberta, and so we're kind of focused on Alberta, Canada. But the Callysto project is national in nature.
Could you give us an introduction on how you got into data science education and what you're currently working on in this area?
Sure. I've been sort of tangentially involved in data science education at first, but then through the Callysto project, definitely got more involved with data science education. So a little bit of background. Cybera's had a data science team kind of around since 2015, 2016. And through that, we did a lot of outreach and educational workshops. So Cybera is a nonprofit organization as well, and we serve the public sector organizations in Alberta. And through that, we connect with a lot of post-secondaries and a lot of K-12 organizations. And we'd host these workshops, or we'd work directly with these organizations. And they were really interested in trying to figure out what data science is and what to do with data science and how they could potentially use it in their organizations, and also really towards data-driven decision making and policy making.
And what are you currently doing with Callysto?
Yeah, so from those beginnings, we kind of took that mindset, and we also started talking and working with the Pacific Institute for the Mathematical Sciences, and they have a project called Syzygy where they were bringing, Jupyter Hub environments to different post-secondary locations throughout Canada. And we started talking and realized, there's an opportunity to maybe extend beyond post-secondary and think about, K-20. So if we can bring similar type computing infrastructure and resources to the younger grades, then maybe there's something really innovative that we can do here. And we can kind of see where it goes. Like, we're happy to kind of, be a bridge across those technology chasms. And we oftentimes say, well, you can use our backs as the bridge. And so we were thinking we would dive in here first. We might take our lumps and kind of see where we go. But that was the idea behind the Callysto project. And that really actually, drove my interest and also my level of engagement with the data science education side of things.
When I see Callysto, I see you bringing different people in to make really awesome content. How do you bring those people into the project?
Yeah, there's an interesting collaboration, like I mentioned, with the Pacific Institute for the Mathematical Sciences. So they are a group of math professors located in Western Canada across different Western Canadian post-secondary institutions, and they have different site coordinators at these locations. And so for the first iteration of the project, we actually engaged many of those site coordinators, and they would recruit, grad students or other interested parties to be involved in the project, and they would help to develop different content that we'd eventually release to the public. And so we use that kind of model. And one thing I think we realized pretty quickly was we also need to really, grad students are great, but we also need to bring in teachers if we're going to try to really connect with teachers. So that was something we definitely developed as we went along.
Great. Could you mention a challenge you faced while building Callysto?
Yeah, that's I kind of alluded to a challenge here. So having grad students develop content is a really, I guess, interesting and sustainable model. But one challenge is really making sure that they remember who the audience is that they're developing content for. So something that might be really, maybe a basic concept or basic math concept that they want to get across might be really easy for them to write a notebook on. But, how do you write that notebook for someone in grade 5? And how do you make sure that the language and, the learning outcomes that you're trying to connect here, a teacher can also understand and connect with and actually use in their classroom effectively and not sort of as a one-off activity?
Yeah, that's super interesting. And this is a bit of a broader question, but I did want to ask, what do you see as the future for data science education as a whole? And then how do you think it's going to continue to evolve? How do you see that process going?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. So it also makes me think of another sort of challenge we've had on the project and sort of the evolution of where I think we need to go. So one major challenge that we've had is really, it's not that we don't get teachers interested in what we're doing. It's not that we don't get teachers, coming out to our workshops, trying out our content. It's how do you get teachers to the point where they can actually create their own content or adapt and comfortably adapt or remix their content for their own classrooms and their local environments. And that's really, the overall sort of end goal of what we're really hoping Callysto kind of leads to is like creating a bunch or, I guess accelerating a bunch of these teachers to become creators of content for their classrooms. And so how do you get there? And I think, there's a lot of challenges associated with how you get there. And also maybe that's also what leads to the future of sort of data science education at the younger grades as well. So for example, a lot of the teachers that first adopt a lot of the content that we use or try a lot of the content that we use are those with very strong technology backgrounds. And oftentimes that's, kind of far and few in terms of like teachers, the number of teachers that can actually do that. So how do you get, more teachers and not just computer science teachers and not just math teachers involved in this? And so I think, the future of data science education is really, it involves a lot of training, to be honest. It involves a lot of like cross-curricular training. So getting people trained not, with their own time. They're not going to be spending just their own time, like in the evenings or on the weekends, kind of like trying to fill those gaps. But actually, like it goes back to, I think, training even as they're becoming teachers. So digital training is a huge thing. So not just data science training, just digital training in general. There are things around copyright that, it's not really something that not all teachers necessarily have the really strong understanding of what is copyright, how does it impact me? What is open source? What are these different sort of public licenses and how can I use and when can I use this content? And that is a really important thing that they need to understand and something that we kind of took for granted as well when we started this project. We thought it would be kind of an inherent thing, but actually, aren't necessarily provided that training as they're going through their sort of pre-service kind of teaching experiences. So I think really the future of data science is going to be like creating these really strong professional learning networks of teachers that allows them to interact with each other and learn with each other and develop that confidence that they need to really be able to create something useful for their class with, a lot of the interactive computing type tools that we can provide. And how you get there, I think it involves a lot of, work with these faculties of education at post-secondary institutions. It involves, working with teachers and their teacher unions and also like the ministries of education or the equivalent in the states. So I think that's kind of the future is like creating these really invested learning communities and open learning communities as well. Because another sort of like huge area which I think is kind of like underserved right now is amongst teachers is sort of the open educational resource side of things just in general. So getting more of an understanding of that, more of a training in that area as well is going to be, I think, really beneficial in the long run.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And you just touched upon it a lot, actually, but Is there anything else you'd like to say about like what we as data scientists and as educators should be doing to continue to be creating and evolving these communities around data science education, that is?
Yeah, I think definitely as a practicing data scientist as well, like we take a lot of things for granted as data scientists. So things that we do as experts, how do you translate that into like beginner type activities, like intermediate type activities for students? Like that's a huge challenge for someone to kind of pick apart and really dissect what they're doing and make it understandable so that, you know, students can learn and pick it up even at a younger age. Oftentimes I think we take that for granted and we just assume, oh, it's obvious what I'm doing. Like someone can follow me and kind of pick that up as they go. But actually, like, you know, not everyone can do that. And maybe someone just needs a bit of a helping hand to get past this one little hurdle. So we need to really dissect a lot of what we do. And I think what's really interesting is that a lot of what we do is really cross-curricular in nature. And that was one of the goals of the Callysto project at the beginning, was how do we get, you know, interesting computational thinking and data science resources or data literacy resources into the hands of teachers, regardless of what they teach. So English teachers, you know, generally social science teachers, like how do we do that and how do we make them really interested and actually be able to show them what they can do with these things? So that's really part of the challenge of what we're facing, and I think that's where we also need to invest more time in just really dissecting, you know, how we do things and really sharing that information out there.
On that note, do you have any favorite topics from Callysto? Like, I mean, so the challenge is like, if I want to make data science lessons for K-12, I need to pick like a topic to embed it in. Do you have any favorites?
I can tell you what we've tried, and there's a few things that like are more eye-catching, but not necessarily clear how teachers will use it. For example, one of the first notebooks we created was something called like Shakespeare and Statistics, and it uses a little bit of natural language processing to understand like parts of speech. So then that's great. Like we can apply, you know, we can grab open Shakespeare text, turn that into like different parts of speech, plot that out on a histogram or something, and voila, we have something. But is that like something an English teacher would use or a math teacher would use? Well, kind of in between, right? So you have an English teacher really interested in, I'd love to understand sort of how, you know, what's the noun usage or verb usage by Shakespeare or, you know, another author. I want to compare the two. But then really, is it something they do in English class or is it math class? So it's really kind of tricky. And so another example of sort of what we've come across recently is we have a social science teacher, Dr. Verena Roberts, working on our team right now. And she teaches a social science class for junior high students. And they were talking about ethics and bias. And so because she worked on our project, she started to make these connections of, maybe I can talk about, you know, AI-related ethics. Maybe I can talk about, you know, a data journalism type topic when I'm talking about data sets and how do you choose a data set and what's like, you know, an appropriate or like a source that you can trust for a data set, things like that. And so there's a lot of different topics which I think related to data science that actually apply cross-curricular, but we haven't really fully kind of solidified what those connections are and make it really clear. Like sometimes I think the teachers themselves are kind of discovering these connections. So we really need to engage with them as well to identify it. Because I think, you know, we come in as experts from one area, but we don't necessarily see all the connections that they see on an everyday basis.
So I think this is what you're just touching on, but like, what are good ways to do outreach and connect with high school teachers? Like maybe Callysto is sitting in a university, but how do you find teachers who are sort of willing to engage, willing to try something new?
That's a great question. And I think oftentimes you don't quite know what's going to work until you try it. So one of the first sessions we ever did as a collaboration between Cybera and PIMS was a talk given by James Collender, the director of PIMS, and my colleague, or former colleague, David Chen. And so they gave a talk at a technology conference for Alberta educators. And I think only like 5 people showed up to that talk. But one of the people that showed up to it was a teacher named David Hay. And he became really interested in what we were doing. And he actually went ahead and created his own content. And eventually we recruited him to work on our project because he's such a strong sort of advocate and kind of a nice example of what a teacher who's really kind of curious could do with some of these notebooks, and he likes to use it with his like grade 4 and grade 5 classes as well. So it's really kind of interesting. And so we've done a lot of teacher conferences. So teacher conferences are a really big thing here in the province of Alberta, but I think nationally as well and across different provinces. And so that's been a really nice way to connect with teachers. For example, we've also done really large talks through the Canadian Math Society. So a former Callysto ambassador, Richard Hashino, who's at Northwestern now, he gave a talk at the Canadian Math Society, and that really caught the eye of a lot of sort of math educators across the country. So those kind of forums work pretty well. What we've seen more recently is kind of an interesting maybe phenomenon because of COVID potentially, and because of the shift or the dramatic and drastic kind of shift to online learning is we found that things like hackathons seem to be catching a lot of attention amongst educators as a tool to really engage and dive deep with students on something that they may not typically do in their classroom. So we've been working to develop a guide, a hackathon guide. So Dr. Verena Roberts worked on that, and a former communication specialist, Casey Knoll, on the Callysto team worked on that, and they developed a hackathon guide, and we shared that out. So that's something that we found has been gathering a lot of attention, and we're planning on running a couple of upcoming hackathons as well with some interested junior high teachers. So it's not just the high school teachers who are actually kind of engaging with us. It's actually a lot of the junior high and actually even younger teachers as well. Like we had a grade 4 teacher reach out to us and say, "Oh, can my students participate in this hackathon?" And we're like, we'd love to. I think it's still the reading and writing comprehension of working with Python might be still a little bit too hard for grade 4s, but I definitely think some can do it. But it's just, in generally speaking, we're getting a lot of interest from teachers who teach at younger grades, and I think that's really exciting, and I think that bodes well for really the future of data science education as well.
Nice. That's great. So my last question is just commenting on what do you think the future is for shared infrastructure, whether in Callysto or Cybera. Do you think it will become easier for institutions to handle their own infrastructure, or how do you see this unraveling in the future?
Yeah, great question. And I had to do a little bit of thinking about this as well. And one analogy I can maybe draw upon is something related to the organization I work for. So Cybera is a nonprofit organization, as I mentioned, but we also we manage and operate the Research and Education Network for the province of Alberta. And so that is connected to sort of the global Research and Education Network. And in the US, there are things like Internet2 and other organizations like that, and ESNet, I believe, that are connected to it. So one of the things that we always advocate strongly about is really shared networks. So, for example, the province of Alberta invested, 20-odd years ago in building something called the Alberta SuperNet, and they thought that would be a major advantage to the province by having all the public sector organizations connected to this provincial-wide network. And that is a really great model, and we think that, that has a lot of benefits. But what is tricky is when you have this shared infrastructure and you want to invite people to use that infrastructure, and they're not necessarily used to sharing infrastructure. So, for example, if you get big telecommunications players coming in, they want to own the infrastructure. They want to have that infrastructure. They don't want to use infrastructure that someone else has built, kind of thing. But we've always advocated for, using what's there. You don't need to double build. You don't need to there's an opportunity to really share all of this and really take advantage of all of this. And we think that's the model going forward as well. There's room for both, but there should be like a willingness to share and be connected and be open. So I think really that is probably my best answer for the future of shared infrastructure, is that we have to really advocate. We kind of have to meet those challenges. We can't kind of back down from those challenges, and we have to advocate for what we think is right. And I think in a lot of cases, the right thing to do is really to think about sharing and not necessarily closing off our walls, but actually opening them up.
Great. Thank you. Did you anything you want to say to wrap up, or any final comments you might have had?
I don't think I have any really final comments. I think we've done a lot of in the last, I guess, 3 or 4 years, we've put a lot of effort into kind of sharing Callysto out nationally. But we're still making kind of baby steps, to be totally honest. Like, there are a lot of organizations, I think, who are interested in this space as well. So I think having not only the teachers developing those professional learning networks, like, we definitely want to connect with them through there, but we also want to create a network of the organizations who are involved in this space in Canada and really connect them and bring everyone together and see what we can do in this space. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and I don't think we're there yet, but that's definitely something that's on our radar and that we'd like to pursue in the future.
Great. I mean, we'd definitely be interested in having conversations and collaborating as we figure out how, to work with the K-12 space as well. I really like the, what I call the data science modules that you have built in sort of like visioning how to adapt those to a K-12 audience. I think is fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, I think you can definitely see how we've evolved, and sort of like it's always kind of a work in progress that we like to iterate on, and that's always the model we've taken, is that it's never really a finished product, but something that we can always get better at.
That's nice. Yeah, and it's clear when you access the Callysto that there are many different institutions involved. There's many different ways to get on. It seems like an open structure. Like it's a framework that many different people can plug into.
Yeah, definitely hope so, and hope people see it that way as well.
Great. All right, thanks, Byron. This has been a great conversation.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for reaching out to me, and thanks for the opportunity to talk about it.
Thanks for listening to today's podcast. If you're interested in learning more about data science education resources, please subscribe to our Substack to get notified when we release any future podcasts. And join our community Slack channel through the link provided in this episode's description. Thank you.